You know it's about time, don't you? You all know it's about time. They're going to seek you out and stomp on you because you make so much noise in your silence. That silence is just going to take us down. I don't know what else to say. I wish everyone understood the depth of what I'm talking about. A lot of people want to dismiss it. A lot of people want to argue with it. Again, I say this over and over. I don't see a lot of reflection when it comes down to actually engaging what's against us. I don't see the substance. BTW RLM 230. For those of you that think that I just have this idea or maybe arrogantly understanding things, it just doesn't play out. The facts show us that we don't respond the way we should. And so I come back behind the woodshed every week, on and on and on. Notwithstanding my misgivings even. Notwithstanding looking out and seeing that there's just not seemingly the response. But during the week, there's response enough in little ways locally. We're making some immense adjustments and changes to literal functioning of government into the more proper direction, and that came by an understanding of the people in the seats of decision on how that was to happen, and we cut through in a way that the system understands that the system cannot actually defeat unless it exposes itself. We move our position back to where the government is serving us more properly. Again, that's going to be an ongoing work. It was a republic if we could keep it. We were gave that republic, so that certainly, by definition, means that the government that was set up and gave us was not of the people. Unless we go to the more technical review of what the people were, and that was essentially the legislators. The whole body of people is not the people themselves. And so we learned this obfuscation of term, and we have to deal with that. There's just not a way to get around it. However, we don't necessarily get lost in it. We put these terms and these obfuscations of them in our toolbox. We don't lead with them. I've learned you don't lead with your knowledge. That's where they start calling you out as a nut because they realize you're starting to catch up to them. So you want to that's your secret weapon, is your knowledge. What you end up putting out is not what you know. It's what you know to do to, in one regard, educate those that are not necessarily, or could be your allies and actually on your side, which would be hopefully most everybody in government eventually, against those that have come in to usurp the whole system, which would be, for the most part, all the bar members, all the political parties themselves. And some of you may be shocked when I say that. Maybe you haven't heard me or haven't heard me long enough. The political parties, you hear lots of people talk about it. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's what have I said a long time ago? It was the opposite wings of the same bird of prey. These political parties. We can say all that. The point is, did you go test it? And I have with my colleagues in 2013 that we sued both the political parties, and they didn't answer. So in law, that's a default. We got their admission that they are the wings of the bird of prey, and we can rely on that. It's not just conjecture or opinion. And so you say, well, what do you do with it? Well, we laid our first foundational stone. And I keep suggesting to you all, when you understand what we've done, to take it out of opinion and put it literally on the ground of the battlefield, and it's a position of fortification, and you can rely on that, and then you might understand that your power has a way to come back, and that it can come back, and it will once you start to work with these things. Don't fight with us or me. Bring the foundation of your next stone that we can step across these floodwaters that have put over us to inundate us against our better needs. We see this all the time. We see those that are in positions of authority, and I'm talking about the ones with the power to hurt you, those are the usurpers that come when they actually come to threaten you. or they do it with a big smile and a hearty handshake, and then they stab you in the back. And you may not see all that coming, but if you listen to me any length of time, you start to get the sense that it's seeable, it's predictable, and if that's the point, then you got two witnesses of a potential future that's more likely a probability. And broadcasts I've been pointing out throughout the broadcast that there's of the numbers of possible ways to look at what we're in, and these are really just to put ourselves in a frame of reference so that we can move from what we understand in our each individual perception. Each one of us has a perception. I give you many examples so that you can at least put yourself in one of those perceptions to more accurately come from a perspective that will do you the better good. You can make up whatever you want in perception as long as it's the right one. You can call it anything you want. I typically will use what I can find in the law, which is a military consequence for our outcome, or we have the corporate overthrow, or we have an international imposition, usurpers that we come in. It just depends on how you want to look at it. It will also depend, when you put yourself there, on how you'll proceed through defending or advancing against this thing. That's all that I'm trying to do, is give you a perspective, to change the perception and to move us along. If we don't have that perspective, we don't have a proper perspective, we're really doing nothing. And we won't know that we're doing anything, is the other thing. But I've been putting, at one level, we put the country, the United States of America, in particular its government, called the United States. They're two different entities, if I can call it that, identifiable things. The government is the United States, and I've told you it's a military terrorist in the world. And you may just agree with me in just the observation of it, just because you're up against your thoughts about what governments are, and you just generally dislike governments, or you can just say, yeah, it acts like a terrorist or whatever. But I'm not talking really from that either. I'm saying it's demonstrably a terrorist in the world, and not by opinion, not by my even thought. I'm in one way, I tell you, I got a little guy in me. It still wants to. It's the little guy in me that believed the world was a grand place, and I think it is a pretty neat place. But I found out we were all being deluded on purpose. And that finally came to roost quite a few decades ago. And I had to ask the question, where did America go? Well, it went to all these places, and it went through all these obfuscations. And it's not enough. I'll just tell you, you can listen to lots of people that will tell you what it's all about. And I do that here just to give you a context, but then I find we have to move on. Now that you see that, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? It's not going away. The reality is what's going to have the power to affect you. So those things are not going away, whatever you describe. And so we have to come to terms with that. And for me, because I can do this I call it, in a way, the analogy is the fractal. The smaller part references the larger part. The micro is the macro. The processes that get us in our smallness also develops into the largeness. You can develop it as the pebble in the ocean, in a pond, that the ripple goes and touches everywhere. You do those a couple of times, and now you get interference patterns, and then they can summate or they can differentiate. And so, this is all can be reduced to whatever analogy you want to build up. I just bring different analogies, hoping someone will pick up on even a glimpse that's close enough for them to pick up on it and get to a better understanding of what's going on around us, to do something. And that's where I see the tear. I see it all the time. The doing is really the tough part. And we're told about it, but we don't tend to believe all that's true. We tend to believe we're above it, and that our talking and our vociferous outcry is enough. And I'm just going to tell you it's not. Getting over to the United States government, I've identified as anybody could just do this on looking around and just have a sentiment of it, but I can show you right in the international law that the United States government is a terrorist, and it's a violator of international law at every turn, and it's a war criminal. And it's not even I don't even have a thought about that more than just to tell you that's a fact. You can just agree with me in just sentiment, but I'm asking you to go through and prove it, so that we get beyond the fact into the objective basis, what I call the black and white. Go find it, find the elements of it. Don't make your opinion. Find the facts, state it, put it down. And delineate how an act is a crime. Don't just say, oh, that's fraud. Figure out what fraud is and go find the element someone's doing and perpetuate it. As I've been telling you, the courts, there's no United States District Court, but two that are competent. And I told you, Ranchero 42 was on it last week. We talked about that. I hope you did tune in and listen to what I was talking about. Very, very important, I was talking about. Interestingly, again, I noticed that the listenership was down on those times when I'm giving you some instruction on how to go do, or actually how to do better and to protect yourself against a deception. And I told you Rancho 42 was all hot on it. Well, during the week, Rancho 42 did some research and found, by reading what I told you to go read, he read that he found one, and I'm going to say it that way, one of the proper courts in the body of the law that I was talking to you about last week to confirm at least half of what I said. Now, I purposely, and just not a plan, I just have a lot of time, not a lot of time on my hands to get into it, and these discussions can get pretty deep, but I did not respond to his finding of the one court. But it did occur to me, and I wanted to say it on the broadcast while it's from last week, and we'll get this repeated news, this notice to us is repeating the same fact that we're going to have to come to terms with and respond to. But he said that he found this court that was not a legislative or territorial court. I want to ask you then, where the United States has all this system and purports and pretends, essentially, and we get to the pretend proof right here, pretends to offer you courts of justice. And I'm notwithstanding any corruption or anything like that, but offers these courts that the statutes tell you have a particular authority, and you disregard it, you walk yourself into a problem where Rancho 42 found one of the courts that I was telling you about isn't one of the courts that most people go to. There's only two of them. I want to ask you now, if Rancho 42 just found that even one of those courts was not a proper court of competent jurisdiction in all the courts that are offered to you called United States District Courts, and that did not include Nevada, it did not include Portland or Oregon, the Portland Federal District Courts, United States District Courts. How are those people being run through the federal courts there in a court of competent jurisdiction? You don't even have to know, if you were just to research that much and find that one court being distinct from all the others, and it's not the court you're in, that is the proof that you live in a deception. You are living and looking and watching people control you that have no actual authority to do so. And this is my frustration. It's a big, big frustration. We can talk about a lot. We could even mention the acts of the Congress that show that this thing's all a setup, and none of us know how to take the position further. It's really disheartening a bit, but anyway, we work through that. I keep working through that. I find people that will not tolerate that and keep working through, not necessarily on this issue, but others. And so it gives me a little bit more impetus to keep moving. That if Rancho 42 could research it, you can too. And he did it pretty quickly. Can't say, I don't know what the actual time was, but in a couple of days he came back with he had found something. And I said I didn't respond to it. It wasn't out of a slight. There's more to find. I also didn't want to talk about it on the internet. I want everyone to make the decisions. They need to see the black and white, how this works. I'm going to ask you again as you're reading, so maybe encourage some of you. You go find that one, even that one court. If you find that one court that says it's not the same as the rest of the courts that you are fed are right and competent, then what are the Bundy people talking about? What is their plight? The court that they're in can't be competent on a simple review of the black and white. And why? And then my frustration now, why then hasn't anybody done even the basic research, the attorneys and the judges to know that, unless you're all being played. And you're all being ignorant and apathetic enough to be played and intend to be played. My frustration with the Bundys themselves. My frustration with my colleague going to talk with Cliven about his condition and this situation and others about his property rights. Years ago. And he rejected the offer of the information that we had processed to him, and now he's sitting in an incompetent court in a jail of an incompetent jailer. This goes on and on and on. And so we agreed to this problem. So, what is this? So that's just right off the reading. You can just do all this stuff. I realize myself that there's a way to go about some of this. It's not the silver bullet answer, but I can't imagine what people would actually start to do if they understood that these courts, that for the most part, all but two, under asserting and vindicating private rights, all but two are incompetent to do that. What might the public record of that be when people really start to get the fact that it's not my opinion? And it's not even that it's not even written into law. It's that actually someone will pay attention to that. Because, see, there's no accountability either. And that's going to be another lesson that people are going to learn that I've been talking about for near ever. And anyway, I mean, if everybody just understood what I just said, that I could stop talking. They would just take what I said and go work and then apply what I'm showing you to incompetences in all manner of places and subject matter. It's the same answer. That's why it's so easy after you see it. It's so easy to go after it. It isn't that much work. There is a steep learning curve, but I was really kind of satisfied for Ranchero42 on Twitter that he had found it in a few days. It's a tough read a little bit unless I helped guide to have observations that he could go use, but he did it. So again, I'm encouraged. I was encouraged for him. I'm encouraged for anybody else that jumps in. The thing is now what do you do with that? And now you see what the failures are in those that claim to be your protectors in the Bar Association or the courts, to stand in the gap between the failures of the attorneys who only practice and those of the ones that determine law, which are supposed to be these judges. And so I get back to the point I was making in discussion that someone found an answer for one. It exposes the whole entire problem for the rest. And I ask again, then how is a judge competent, no matter whether or not it has Article 3 competency? How is a judge sitting in an incompetent court competent? And I'm talking about the commissioned judges. I'm not talking about the magistrates, which are completely incompetent in the proper jurisdiction, and the senior judges, their commissions are retired. I'm not even talking about those, which maybe they'll tell you that they're competent in a court, but they won't tell you whether or not that court's competent. And you'll see that failure in every order that they give you. And unless you see the secret, you see the trick. In other words, there's no pea in the cup of the ones they're having you choose. They've stolen that away. And once you haven't heard that from anybody, and you don't see how to apply that trick, then you miss the whole thing, and you get persuaded into these illegitimacies. And these usurpers continue to mock you in all your opinion and your thoughts. Because when they said you got a republic if you keep it, that's an action term of keeping. Well, keep and bear was the same word, wasn't it? Did you do that? No. You let them come in and you let them stomp all over an absolute prohibition of the right to keep and bear arms, didn't you? That keeping is an important problem. The keeping is an important word and term, and it's a keep. What goes back into medieval times, and it used to also be tied to your castle, the castle keep. So we get to the government. Now the government's going to be sticking you right in your face and tell you and have this whole listen. The whole nationwide system is a corruption, and yet I hear nobody talking about it. I hear nobody challenging it. I hear nobody making the record for it, even if the corruption is going to interfere, to let people know more clearly what's going on. If the government's willing to do that to you here, as I keep telling you, whatever's happening out there in the international sector is happening and happened to you here. That you don't see the bombed out buildings and the destructed infrastructure and the facade and the stage play that you are part of. You miss the movie. You miss the entire story. We have another effort. I keep telling you more evidence. The carnival mirror we look at over in the Middle East, which is not a carnival mirror to be disregarded. This is real people really dying. Real people having their nation destroyed. But it's a carnival mirror to us because it's so contorted, we don't recognize that our nation is as destroyed. We keep making it up. The perception of everything we have, notwithstanding we find out everything's falling apart around our ears and we take a deaf ear to it. If we'll miss the fact that the courts are incompetent, they're dilapidated, they're derelict, They're a garbage scow that's floating just at the surface, ready to sink. If you don't recognize that in your courts, notwithstanding the murder memo that said the United States will not have anything judicial happen, if you've missed the derelict nature of your courts, how are you going to notice anything else? You just need to ask yourself in earnest that point. How are you actually able to see a thing, to have an opinion? As I'm having a frustration with the areas where we are, the point of the fires and such, everyone has an opinion. Does no one read the law that they have every opinion about this? The law is pretty settled. It would probably be no subject matter to speak about if you go read the law. It's a one sentence. But no, we have broadcast after broadcast, dumb opinion after dumb opinion coming out of people, and it's breads and circuses. And yet, people's houses are being burnt, and the forest is being burnt, and people are getting their health-wise are being destroyed, all because there's a plunderer that under the color of authority that no one wants to call it out. No one wants to say, "Oh, you have no authority. The emperor wears no clothes." In fact, the emperor not only wears no clothes, he's in any subject matter, he's a criminal, or she's a criminal. And we have to keep that away from us. We have a duty to arrest. United States airlifts Daesh terrorists in Syria for second time in a week, is reported by Press TV, whatever you might think about it. There's another just a point to touch on. United States, their little proxy tool is now their tools are being moved around because of the problem with people who didn't put up with it and had the power to stop a bully, punching the bully in the nose. They're moving all their gang members into different places in Syria. The United States is doing that. If you needed to hear again how the United States is the terrorist. And the so-called, this is, and is us, and is Israel, is right here in your face if you wish to look at it. If they're willing to do and dilapidate your country right in front of your face and you let it happen, what do you think they're doing in other places? It's not over there, folks. It's just a mirror that we get to see it's actually happening over here. And I quickly noticed bear arms, and it's like I've always said, roll up your sleeves. We have the right to bear arms. Thank you, Grimner. There's always these nice little double jokes and things, and the point, being we can laugh at that part, and it is cool, but they're doing some serious stuff against all of us, and it's a discernible group of people that it slips right underneath it. It's just invisible to you. It's no different with the Terminator coming invisible to your environment. That they're here to destroy you. And they've learned how to do it better than they used to, which is just to take down just tear down the wall of your castle and rummage through it all and burn it. Now they say, well, I can use that castle, and I can use all the serfs to make food, and you see that in the Libra code. Leave the producer alone because he'll provide for you. Don't harm him too much. And we don't take this seriously, what's going on. And so fine. I got to one tap. That was cool. So the United States government is a terrorist, moving its tools and its pawns around, its fodder, to interfere with someone else's government. And we should not, as a people, be okay with that. Well, why would we be okay with that, I guess? One thought occurs to me. Why are we okay with that? What I was also telling you about the military connection. What they're doing over there, they're doing over here. And they're gonna be bringing it on, and everyone recognizes this, Battlefield America. We know the cops are getting military weaponry. They made laws in order for the local governments to pick up military stuff. And I said, that's just them slowly rolling out the fact of your actual existence being under military command. And people have a hard time understanding that. And they haven't really, if they haven't read the Libra code, which is the plan, if you go look at it, it tells you you're not going to recognize. This thing is going to be something you don't recognize. In fact, they're going to be, those that are making everything look normal may actually have a known threat against them to expose to you the military nature of the control, because all civil outward fascia will look normal under a military occupation. And I've asked, and no one answers me, how would you know that you lived in a state, in a condition that was the fact? RoboCop reality. Massive military drones could start replacing police helicopters. Why military drones? This is just more evidence to me that the fact of you live in battlefield America, it's always been like that. Now they're letting you know. And military drones are over. Remember, we heard the news, it was coming. Here they are. They're coming right around the corner. I want to read just the headlines. Just tell us it's here. You can read the story. I could read it to you. They'll just tell you exactly that they're doing it. And what do they refer to? The Middle East operations. The mirror that's coming to America, as I've said it. I've told you this was happening. I was hoping more people would listen and pass the word. And that doesn't seem to happen. Now, that said, Minds.com has been pretty good at passing at least lots of views, which I hadn't had before, so I appreciate that connection and everybody that helps to pass the message through that. Lots of places to listen to the broadcast, much, much more than we had before. I'm not so sure it's still better than having a cohesive network, but that's not for me to decide now. We're where we are, and we have to go to lots of places with hardly a nary a lineup of hosts. And I understand it's to say UCY.TV. Those of you that listen, I think I was hearing that I asked about Clint Richardson's going to be coming back to UCY, I understand, right after this broadcast on Sunday. And he'll be coming in with a produced broadcast, live and pre-tape. So for those of you who want to listen to Clint, he'll be on live right after me, which I think is important for live interaction. I think I thought that was important for Oracle, where I was, that we had that connection to people. It's not just canned stuff passed around all the time. So it'll be interesting. I won't be able to speak to what I'd like to be able to integrate with more hosts to get the message out a little bit cleaner. Because there's still things that we need to work on, even in other hosts that I listen myself in the way I interpret things. I don't get stuck on the definitions more than where are we going to use them and how's that going to play for us? And what do we need to do to get around the traps? So I play a little different that part, which I probably could bring some insight to. And I like to speak to all that, but someone coming after my broadcast is a little bit difficult to speak to. The point is I think we all have integrated information somewhat, that you can start building the things you need to really take this thing and work it as you see. I told you. I'll just read according to defense contractor that developed the Predator and Reaper drones for United States military operations in the Middle East, drones will have begun to replace piloted law enforcement helicopters by the year 2025. Is the military in your face coming at least by 2025? I told you this was coming. I told you this was going to happen, and they're just rolling out the consequence from happening way back in 1868 or so, when they made it official, gave you exactions of every kind rights equally. When they destroyed the southern five southern countries, made them dependent on the Union, the Yanks, under the cover and color of slavery, and then imposed slavery as a consequence, and no one understood that. Remember, Title 42, Section 1981 says those new freed people will have the rights of a white citizen to pay exactions of every kind. For all you all getting lost in this Nazi Antifa nonsense. Unconcerned about Trump's militarization of the police? This database shows what your local cops have. This is being so rolled out now, it's not even hidden, that the militarization of the police is really just the transfer to the truth of what they've always been. And if people would have noticed, the government never served you. When you go to get service from them, they hide underneath the statutes, and in particular, if you go to the state's attorney general, they'll say, we can't help you unless you fit in consumers. We can't defend. Oh, that means commerce too, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, but unless you're a consumer, we can't help you. We are the attorney for the government corporation. So everyone didn't understand this whole thing has changed a long time ago, and it doesn't work for you at all. It uses you as an excuse to give you more exactions of every kind. And they're coming with the military again, and now there's even a database. The information is so available, they're going to stick it on a database for you, and you can see what your local cops have. Full notice, right in your face, folks. There's no hiding this stuff anymore. And you're hearing direct relation from Syria and the machines of war that they use there to come to a locality near you. Shouldn't be the function of an opinion any further, and should be a bit of an alarm. And I don't know why it isn't, more than just to cause us to do what? Yak about it. And they base it all on what? On their presumptions against you. They just assume something is the fact, and that's good until you can overthrow it. Why it became so important that we started to engage. You know, as I just think about that, everywhere I've helped people that they engage where we have found you need to, and I'm talking maybe particularly to producers, mining, water rights, all this kind of thing, property rights, patents. They don't have the problems I hear lots of people having. And those that don't have a ton of problems. And so we have these proofs coming along that notwithstanding what we see as the military consequence that's happened long time ago to us, we can still walk in the middle, in neutrality, in the narrow path. And that neutrality speaks to international law. And so we have the ability to see what we need to see and do what we need to do. And I'm just flabbergasted not more people pick that up. I was excited for Rancho 42, whether or not he understood what he's found. The fact of the distinction, and even one of the whole mass, exposed the problem, exposed the failure of Nevada courts and the Bundy problem, exposed the cruel deception on everybody, exposed there is no judiciary already except for those two courts, and as I told you before, those courts may not actually be available to us. And let me just expand on that just really quickly. For those of you that want to go to find the appeals court back there at the Federal Circuit, the Federal Circuit Appeals Court, and go look at their website and tell me whether or not they admit or not, whether or not, what jurisdiction they're in. They'll tell you what they are. And that's a pretty fascinating court right there. And it's an appeals court. Anyway, getting back to this knowledge that we're supposed to have that we don't, getting back to the assumptions made that are not, getting back to the wrong assumptions made that we live under that harm us, that we don't throw off. I've been, one of these ongoing other things is this, because part of the system kind of works through best sciences, I'm very critical of the so-called science anymore. And it doesn't mean that it's not there, but for the most part, it's a political science. It's politics, not science. It's lobbying. It's driven by grant stream funding for outcomes, not really research. And so we just see the same assumptions being put on us that we accept here in other areas, like we see that, it's okay for having military contractors now in our states. That used to be unlawful. You couldn't have the military in your states. It was supposed to be unlawful. What happened to that, folks? This is within just a couple decades. See, what happened to that was this thing called 9/11. But it wasn't started there. That's just the final push, where they finally got it into the ultimate police power, which was national security. And so where do I talk? Where do we talk in production? I talk about how it interferes with national security. So we go occupy the same space in law. And since we're the support and foundation, and you are too, whether you know this or not, whether you want to agree to it, or whether you want to just stick your nose up in the air and say you're not, just to cross your hands in your legs and just say, I'm not going to support any of that. You're doing it even in that action and doing nothing, but you're not doing it in a way that protects you. You're doing it in a way that they use against you. That you go out and you present yourself as someone who supports the entirety of this thing in the foundation, as Libra Code says, don't mess with the producers. You stay inside there, and all of a sudden you have a way to protect yourself. Is the law of the land. It is sitting in the same place and in the foundation position of where the government went when it utilized its awesome power, they tell us, when it went to its own security. And I said, okay, if they're going to do that, and I said this decades ago, they're going to go there, we have to find something more foundational than that. And I found it in this mining law. And it's not just the mining law, it's the property law. And so when you start really understanding what I'm actually advocating here, that we run to the most foundational place we can, and it's a narrow place, a narrow path place. And we don't have to go far on it. We don't have to stray from it. And more of us started to do to make that example and evidence that it's there. Things are going to be relieved from those in the position of neutrality in this war of the world. When we start to out and identify when real things are happening, not models of things are happening. See, when I was young, these models, what they're calling now drones, it was just a model airplane when I was young. Boy, we would have loved to have the camera, be able to put a camera on this thing. It would have been a fascination to have an electric one fly. No, we had to use gasoline engines for these things. So there's been a marvel in that alone, but now they're drones. They're not just remote control airplanes or boats or cars. No, they're weapons now. And they're fully functional. And then they grew up. They kind of gave them steroids. And now they become these things that they're going to be flying over your head in 2025. Before that, for sure. And they've already got it. They had 3 or 4 they already put in, had to get special permission. Even the agencies, the FAA is not running fast enough. But we work on all these assumptions, and these things are worked against us. And one of my things about this best sciences was look at the science. It's not science. And here we have another evidence that this information that we have, that we're fed all this time, all this stuff I was learning was just a bunch of nonsense. Sandia Labs has a report that says black hole models contradicted by hands-on tests at Sandia's Z machine. A long-standing but unproven assumption about the X-ray spectra of black holes in space has been contradicted by hands-on experiments performed at Sandia National Laboratory's Z machine. Z, the most energetic laboratory X-ray source on Earth, can duplicate the X-rays surrounding black holes that otherwise can be watched only from a great distance, then theorized about. Of course, emission directly from black holes cannot be observed, Sandia researchers said, a researcher and lead author Guillaume Louisiel, a lead author for the paper of the experimental results published in August. We see emission surrounding matter just before it is consumed by the black hole. The surrounding matter is forced into the shape of a disk called an accretion disk. Now, based on these assumptions as well for this experiment, they were able to find out that what they thought about black holes isn't reality. Once they get what scientists do is test nature, they find out the made-up models, like man-made global warming, the made-up models do not replicate reality. Remember, your AI is now based on all these unreplicable models now. Remember how this is working. But they went through and found out that they cannot replicate reality in the models. It's going to cause a complete rethinking about what's going on in space. Is what I've told you have to take note of when you see the system failure this huge, how do you pronounce that, huge? How many pronunciations of that we're going to have now? It's big, folks. This is showing you that so-called science is politics driven. And it takes they're getting so far off the mark, someone had to actually go do something. You had to go do something, folks, to find out what reality would say, even though the assumptions made in the experiment were assumptions. They found something that would discredited the entire field. They make a very interesting acknowledgement, though, which I was interested to see that they don't touch too much about, which actually may be more of the point about what they are dealing with that they've been avoiding this entire time. It does make a mention. Most researchers agree a great way to learn about black holes is to use satellite-based instruments to collect X-ray spectra, said Sandia co-author Jim Bailey. Well, remember, most researchers agree is consensus. That may not be the truth either, but they're going to be using satellite-based instruments. He says the catch, notwithstanding they all agree about this, there's a catch, and they still agree despite the catch. The catch is that the plasma that emit the X-rays are exotic. And models used to interpret their spectra have never been tested in the laboratory until now. And when their models were tested, they failed. And they say this other thing, or when they say it's exotic, they don't have a clue. What the most realistic thing to look at here is they recognize that that energy is in the form of a plasma. That's the closest you're going to get right now, it seems, to the truth and reality, and they don't have a clue about it. And I think once you apply this this plasma, this exotic plasma existence to our creation, our universe, if we could get our mind wrapped around it, it's probably going to give us a lot faster way to get certain things understood, whether or not we can integrate with it. But so inside the story, you see reference to something that I've been watching, something that's in my mind is plasma energy, other things around all that, and how I think about how we're being fed a bunch of lies to fortify the objects of government and the objects of political science, not political science that they teach in college, but the politics in science that they use against us to feed us the nonsense that we then absorb to believe they know what they're talking about. And they agreed right here they don't know, and they don't even know that the assumptions they made in the test are valid. But out of all those words, all the words in this article, as soon as I saw the word plasma, and then they called it and identified it exotic, I knew this is where they have not intentionally now, they know it's there, intentionally not looked at. And yet you look at scientists who kind of come up against the wall. There's other people out there that are re-looking at a lot of the stuff that we were told was law, and finding out it's absent. It's completely void of authority, void of reason, void of actual application. Yet that is what our society runs on at this point. And this is a cool time. I didn't like it. Spent all my life with certain ideas, even though I have my objections to it all. I don't have the time to go research and be that scientist I wanted to be to disprove this all. But then what are you doing? Now you're still fighting. It's not the legal system you're fighting. You're fighting the science system. The point is, it's all officialdom, which guides all the policy in the world. And if you don't understand where you get the evidence for these things, these anomalous characteristics in the so-called science, when they're bringing best sciences upon you, and you don't have the questions about the question, the authority and jurisdiction it has to be speaking at all, you're going to be one of the tools that you need to defeat that is being used against you is not available to you. Is probably the only reason why I bring it up. Your view of the creation and the universe can be whatever you want. Does it matter that these people don't get that right? Well, not when they're looking outward, but if they take this technology on their failed models and turn it inward, like Michael Mann made global warming, then it's going to cost you. And it's going to cost you dearly, and it's going to cost you silently. You're not going to even know. All you know is that you're working harder and not getting as much. Things are costing more because there's been an adulteration put in the system, an aberration that no one caught. Assumptions made and things applied that were not understood and not correct. And nobody was there to question it. How these people got here to question this is interesting to me, and the only thing I can come with is that this science so-called in astrophysics and all these other things are coming to the wall of truth. That they've been scamming everybody following dead ends. And they kind of knew it. Otherwise, why would they talk to plasma that they knew it existed without, and knowing it's exotic without having much of any discussion about that and their models and how it would interfere, or how it could interfere, or how it would cause a problem? is the same thing I get, same little one word that pops up when I read these articles that causes my mind to think about the other things. In this case, it was plasma. In a recent document about the fire and the causation of it, it was the word negligence. My thought, as soon as I saw the official saying, well, it's not negligence, I go, why are you even talking about it unless it was? Is that me being cynical? I don't know. It's just the first question. Why are you even talking about it? We're talking about fighting a fire here. Why are you talking about the negligence part? I mean, if we're all assumed to be presumed innocent, you're doing what you can, right? Why are you feeling guilty? Well, we started researching all that. You find out the reason why they said it, because in the legal, they have to deny that there was any culpability, and negligence is one of the things that they'll find liability to. And so that's the first place I go look. In this case, we had a situation, because the fires are such a big news in the West. In fact, I think I heard Vinny on Freakers Ball talking about dealing with the smoke in the West. It's a big issue. And we've identified Jefferson Mining District. Go on the website, go on the left-hand side, go down, you find the fire level map, the fire class map, and you'll see that the Forest Service actually plans for conflagrations that cannot be put out but by nature. And then you come across a document back in 1995 and 96 that it's made, folks. How long they've been stroking us all this time. With all the words that I tell you, the meta language I tell you to look for, it's all there. It's been there since 1995 and belonged there before. About fire policy in this country, United States of America. And when you start reading that, you realize what the reason was. They said the word negligence in defending themselves. Because they work on a model that hasn't been tested and can't be, and it's contrary to the law, actual law, reality, the natural law, how things actually work. The failure in the science of trying to make a fairy tale out of our creation in the failed models is the same story in how we do things administratively in the functions of the government. I said administratively, folks, because the black and white doesn't actually allow them to do what they do. It's what they are having to be judged against when you all know that that's what's supposed to be there to force their hand, and why they address the negligence issue. These people are at least negligence. I call them, criminals. In the case of fire, it's arsonists. These people are arsonists, and they're destroying your ways of life. They're destroying your resources. They're destroying your health. They're destroying all kinds of things, yet there's no law that actually supports it. And then on the other side, there's nobody that understands this in order to make accountability to enforce it. And in this thing about the fire, there's a fire policy that's been going down, and I had a link for the source, which was again a wilderness.net people. They got fire policy. They printed out what the fire policy is. They're all part of it, commingling all this stuff and cohorts to it. They explain all kinds of things about these processes, that how they're going to do what they think, their perception on what their new fire management plan is going to be. Well, folks, you don't manage fire, you put it out. No, what the new-fangled landscape wildfire is to wild the place. And they're going to manage fire to do that. And so they use the terms now in a different way. If you don't understand that, you don't understand that they're lying to you when they're talking to you, square in your face. It's not hard to see. And though I'll give you the link, it may not come up for you, the document. Let me read a section here that in and of itself shows you that the fire policy of the United States of America is based on principles that are meant to destroy. And you'll see within the document, and I won't read for more, you can go find the document, read the part yourself, that they want to educate you to make that okay. They want you to be agreeable that watching more conflagration is not their fault, not their negligence. It's just part of nature. That this one provision here at the fire management, this model they've created, they actually put in a heading called risk management. To me, I don't know about you, but that to me is insurance. That's mutual aid, mutual insurance. That's bonding. That's all kinds of another type of financial and fiscal support as well. Inside this statement of it's risk management, like you would go to the state when they harmed you, and you go through risk management in order for them to figure out what they're going to do with your claim and how bad they're going to abuse you. But right here in this passage, risk management, because of the potential for unintended consequences, and prior in the document they said they're going to have to educate the people to accept more unintended consequences. Because of the potential for unintended consequences, prescribed fire is one of the high-risk activities the federal law management agencies engage in. They have chosen to prescribe fire as a wilding method. They have said in this document that they have chosen the highest risk to y'all. That alone should be enough for people to go up in arms and come against it and the other powers of the government. And I hear nobody doing that. Nobody reads the law. No, you listen to the agency. This is an arsonist talking. In fact, in the document, they even say that they're going to prescribe fires even during fire season. If those two right there aren't enough to tell you these folks are insane arsonists and don't have your better interests in mind, I don't know what more to say. If you won't read these articles, these documents, I don't know what thought you have. I don't know why you would have a complaint when you can't breathe or can't see across the street because of the smoke, or that the fact of the fire trucks running up and down not putting out the fire. But the agencies on a federal level have taken on the highest risk fire. It's a tool, not as a firefighting or preemptive measures. Is us allowing criminals take over our country. It's the same method all over. In this paper, you'll read about stories regarding the authority, the report. And they said that the reason why they couldn't go into fight was something called the Wilderness Study Act area. Well, nobody went to that act to go find out that it references a wilderness act. And no one went to the act that they say, the act that precludes them from fighting a fire, doesn't say in that act that it precludes any such thing. That when it's these wilderness study areas are set aside, and and those of us that deal in this know it's a setup and a plan to steal more land and to put things into wilding and to put it into no use, preservation and conservation, or in making war crime action out of this as well, making your resources unattainable. And they speak to the landscape level instead of the law, which speaks to the watershed. If you're missing all these term obfuscations, you're missing the whole trick. That you look in the law, 43 U.S.C. 1782, for the excuse why in some areas they're allowing these fires to burn, you won't find an obstruction to their putting out a fire. You do see reference to the Wilderness Act. And I reference you then over to Title 16, U.S.C. And Title 16 is where the Forest Service gets their authority to do things. And I will direct you now to 16 U.S.C. 1133. And you go down to the place where it actually speaks to fire. And I'll go down past that part of the paragraph into the place I want to speak to. In addition, it says, such measures, and I'm reading directly from it, so it's not even a paraphrase, as I usually do. In addition, such measures may be taken as to be necessary in the control of fire, insects, and diseases, subject to the conditions as the Secretary deems desirable. This authority is given a desirability delegation to the Secretary. So, there is nothing here that says that you can't go fight a fire, even in a wilderness area, and certainly not in a study area. But everybody that doesn't read the law, and I'm just talking the surface of this law because I haven't talked about the actual authority that runs this, why you can go fight a fire. There's nothing precluding fire fighting, even in a wilderness designation area. But the one story that I've got to get that link for you, was keeping the fire managers from going in and doing it. They're not firefighters, they're fire managers now. They're managing the fire to do something, folks. The wildfire, the wilding fire. That there's nothing, when you read the black and white, that anybody should or ought to have an opinion more than what Congress has said to tell the Secretary that you can fight the fire as desirable. Now that's a pretty open-ended desirability. What's the desire based on? Well, they have their priorities list. But when you find out they use in the policy they use the fire as a prescription, like some doctor, you start to find the cracks in the cover, in the porcelain, about how this is supposed to work. But let me now bring in the other side of this. The reason why fire, two reasons why fire is not off limits, and that there's models and theories about how to fight it are irrelevant at every point, is because fire is a common enemy. In fact, on the Forest Service side, the Forest Service is mandated to mitigate all fire. And so when you go back to Jefferson Mining District and go down the left-hand side and find the fire class map, and you don't see any level 1, which is the law mandates it's supposed to be, and you see a lot of level 3, which the law says should never exist, and they've planned that since 1995, you know this is an arsonist's plan. And that proof and this little designation shows that if the local authority secretary's object is desirable to burn the forest, he's an arsonist. Because if it doesn't meet the local needs, as NEPA would say, for impacts, when that fire starts to threaten, even before it reaches off the land of the wilderness, if it threatens the public, the greater public, the counties have the power to go in and stop that fire. And then you find out that the bar of desire was too low in the secretary because the secretary allowed a conflagration on two levels. One, they didn't harvest, not thin, but harvest, to keep the forest in class 1. A class 1 fire area is one that when a fire starts, by whatever means, it will put itself out. Class 3, when you get to the other side, is a fire that cannot be put out no matter what you throw at it, and it requires Mother Nature to do so. That the mandate on the Forest Service is to put the fire out and to make the situation and condition that it stays in class 1 as best as you can. The only thing that can do that is harvesting, but they've precluded that. They now want to use fire itself as the tool and steal from the counties the revenue that harvesting would give them. That thinning also steals. And when the fire comes through and burns up your areas, they claim that the Forest Service, the arsonist, has authority to dictate to your local fire crews on their model of their policy that no one looked at and said that no local government got input on. None. That the police power of the county can step in and shut it down. And so when you hear Vince talking about the fires are thick and all that, he's just making evidence to you that he's experiencing an unhealthy condition. There's also another stipulation in these sections of the law, when you go read them, that environment itself is a factor. Health, see, this is a police power, so health, safety, welfare, morals, etc., are what the government has as a power. They're referring to their their governmental police powers. So there's no authority here in its own inception to allow the forests to burn. Not even in a wilderness area. And so if we go around continually believing that these arsonists are the authority and that what they say is the law and that the law supposedly, we think they're operating the law, we just give in to them and say they're operating under the law, notwithstanding what we see reality telling us, we can only expect trouble. So do you want to live underneath the failed model of the scientists as they move this best sciences along? The fire plan that uses best sciences? The same failed models of scientists in conservation biologists and other scientists to run this political agenda. Do you want them running your life? They are. Do you want them to continue running your life? That's a decision you have to make. And I would say to condemn you. If you don't turn and find the wrong you need to make right, you're an accessory. And I don't even know what you're complaining about. And that's only on fires. I mean, this is where the place where they've set it up to burn. I don't see anybody talking. I see everyone's opinion. I see no one actually going to. I just read you the provision that says that there's no provision against fighting a fire in a wilderness area or a wilderness study area. Why isn't it happening then? Is a question to your local county commissioners about why they're not asserting their police powers in the first instance. And I don't talk out of opinion here. We're working with some counties, and we have been working one for a number of years that finally got their own plan in place and contract, and they do have their first responders can do an initial attack without permission of anybody if that fires anywhere in the county. Now, based in that, like I told you about the district court, you find the one anomaly, just the one, even though there's two, you find the one. Now it puts a question on the others. But when I have one county that can go into every area and put out any fire, what does that make the rest of the counties? But derelict. By whatever reason, honest ignorance or by plan. And we sit back and we just take the smoke. We take whatever harm is being put on us because someone some slave, employee, master slave relationship, some employee of the government said so. Is that what your life is? You being dictated by the slave of government? The master-slave relationship? I thought this was a land of law, not men, or the rule of men. What do you think the rule of law is but the rule of men and women? We don't care one to go to the law and find out they're all lying to us and criminals. Why? So Congress has laid out this thing for us if we were just to go to that law, and it's pretty clear. You don't have all this problem when you do the law. As I told you, the law of the land is a law of peace. When you're not living in peace and you see insanity around you, that means the law is not being applied. The objective basis is long gone. And this is in a subject matter area that not even the military powers can actually argue with. In fact, they're duty-bound to protect the protection of it. And that's another layer that I don't usually talk about. I've got nobody that would understand that one. It's not that I haven't heard people talking about it, but there's not in a proper place, and there's nobody to receive it either. That's how fallen this nature is, also replicating the fallen nature of man himself. We just allow this stuff. But we'll complain and complain and complain. Oh, complain to high heaven, and then wonder where the grace went. Just amazing to me to watch. So at a time before we see these agendas, the Congress was doing things in land law under its obligations to do so, notwithstanding the fact of that contract problem that the Congress had with the states, and the states have as an obligation and duty itself, not as a sovereign. Something that you can defeat. You can defeat all sovereignty by this relationship, because there is no sovereignty in that relationship to you. In fact, I just had a miner who wouldn't listen to what I said, wants to think that they know, do it all the wrong way, and got all the right answers. Tried to sue, where I suggested before to do, but he didn't do all the preparatory work, didn't lay the foundation. The government came back with all the right answers about how he couldn't do what he's going to do, and I told him that. I said, you're getting a lesson here on what's all the stuff I told you were supposed to do. All these letters that you're getting right now are telling you what you failed on. And so the government's not even laughing at you. They're telling you exactly what you can't do and why you couldn't do it, and it's valid what they're telling you. That you could have, once you read the black and white, used and taken away the things the government uses to shield itself. And what did I just reference? But you just read the law. That's how you take it out. They're actually not lying to you. They're defeating your remedy, and you feel that's all bad. But in fact, they're telling you that you didn't do something consistent with the law in getting your remedy forward. And that was solved by reading the law. And I said, there's nothing precluding you from looking at what they've just given you, 6 different items in 2 different letters that explain how you did it wrong, that you can fix and go back in when you finally understand. That requires some reading. And I've told you before, from my standpoint, it doesn't require that you have to go seek it out like I had to figure out how to do this. Given some subject matter area study I've done, I can show you the beginning of the trail, folks. I can't do your study. I can give you some highlights in the trail, but you have to go do that study yourself, like Rancho 42 did. I said, here it is. Here's what I found. Confirm what I've done and see it. Now you find it, think about what that means. Think about what that means, folks. And even if we did nothing more, I'm silenced in somehow I'm just silenced when I think about the awesomeness of the deception that we're looking at and how well we're controlled. Literally. And it does affect us, and it affects how we respond, and it affects that we do respond, that we don't, actually. But so this government is set up, but it's been infiltrated over time. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. Let's not get into the absolutes. There's always been something to work on. If I could say, we're a work in progress, trying to live up through our fallen nature that we're told we have. And it's exploited all kinds of ways, and now I think of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion as a manual of your own frailty, and that they know that they can exploit it, and you fall into that all the time. I'm not immune from it. We all have our things, but now that when I know about it, I'm always looking around. What have I left myself vulnerable to? It's not a preoccupation. It just happens to be part of the thoughts as you build into what you're doing. But since we look from the law of the land, and where it's nice and solid, it's on foundation, we can see clearly there's some realities that happen. Everybody used to know that you don't have to get permission to fight a fire. You just don't. And I won't go any further on that. That should show you that the power's in the people and in your governments to shut down any arsonist who looks like they have a color of authority to stop you from fighting a fire. At worst, folks, all they can charge you is for the damage you've done to put the fire out. In other words, you take down a fence, you got to pay to replace the fence? Maybe. But you're not a criminal. And they'll tell you that you are, and you have to have a backbone enough to stand up and say, listen, you're the arsonist. I don't have to listen to you. You put me in jeopardy. You obstructed me fighting an enemy. You're the accessory to the enemy. That's my phrase. A lot of people have a much more basic conversation than I do. I just talk this way because it just comes to my mind to say so on the broadcast. But I got a dozen examples of how people stepped in and fought a fire without having to get permission. How many times I was in a forest on a volunteer crew fighting forest fires, and we didn't listen to the Forest Service. We went down and they said put an 18-inch trail in the forest, and we went in and put an 18-foot wide trail in the forest, and we stopped the fire. And that really kind of ticked them off. They didn't want the fire stopped. Pretty obvious you needed a whole lot more than 18 inches on a 40-degree slope. And even that, a couple places, wasn't good enough. We had to go bail over the side to go get the rolling logs that came down and put them out right where they started the fire upon the line a couple times. But they didn't want us making a highway up there and stopping the fire. And that's when you start looking. These people are arsonists, these people in the white trucks with the Forest Service logos on the side. This was decades ago, folks. And so a clear mind says we got a problem, and we've got to stop that. Fire will kill. It's indiscriminate. It kills everything. And so that when there was foundational law of the land being made, people were more rational. There was realities they dealt with. Now, it's based on these agendas that are based in models that do not meet reality, literally. And they were getting our clues about these. I tell you, read the black and white, it's not there, yet they're doing something else, or the science says, we just finally did the test that decades of theory were based on, and now all that falls and collapses. Collapses like the black hole we thought it was when it runs out of fuel to eat. These lawmakers have become looters and plunderers. And again, as I tell you, the military is coming in through these mechanisms, or the military consequences coming down to tell us of its existence, and we are obligated to throw it off. And I say, don't do that when you don't have to put yourself in jeopardy to do that necessarily. I've learned a lot since I first started to do this. You don't have to put yourself in jeopardy. What you have to do is make sure how not to put yourself in jeopardy while you make that record and move it along and expose these people that live under false models and false policy, not law, or policy that's not law, that the policy does not meet the law. And it comes contrary to known law. Remember, I told you the consensus process is not constitutional, not statute. It's not even statutory. It's not codified, nothing. It just comes by its own agenda. We got that on the Jefferson Mining District website on the left side as well. It's a statement it's right from the consensus.org. You find that section right I think it's above the fire class map. And when you start seeing things coming that do not meet constitutional provisions or challenge it, you've got to know it's them. However you want to describe them, it's them. The usurpers, the military supporters, whatever name you want to put on it. It's not peaceful. It's the war brought to your door. It's the republic stolen. And I mean in the context, as I see it now in the the property law, mining of law of which is one, homesteading is another. Grants and patents are evidence of the fact of this stable, foundational, peaceful way to produce, where in every other country and over history there was never this protection that allowed you to be in peace to continue your production and live your lives the way they were. That standard now is invaded. It's only invaded actually, it's not invaded in the law and it's not invaded in the remedy. It's invaded because we accept the policy is law instead of the fact of the law is being is ignored, actually, negligently so. A new Senate bill targets WikiLeaks, Russia, independent press, and First Amendment was a story that came out. I think Grimner sent this to me on Twitter, but the point was it was the attack we were talking about last week. They're attacking what you thought was First Amendment rights. Now, why would the Senate actually do that unless they're no longer your Senate? Why fabricate, again, as they fabricated the black holes and want to dismiss plasma, why do you think they keep focusing on Putin did it? Unless they're hiding something and they think they can get away with it, and there's no Sandia Labs to go test the reality. I'm not saying that there's no Sandia Labs to test that reality that Putin didn't do it, but I'm saying that until we get that, until you are one of those that steps up to be that one or that group that does that these models go untested, every one of them. With Russia meddling narrative serving as pretext, well, what word? Have you heard that word be used? Have you heard me use that word before, folks? Pretext? Of course you have. Pretext. The United States Senate, embracing the Pompeo Doctrine, now they give it a name, is moving to stifle and criminalize WikiLeaks and, by extension, any such, quote, dangerous, transparency-providing entities that threaten to cast doubt upon Washington's, quote, official stories. That's the subtext. Do I need to know more? When you got the government, so-called, coming to attack a constitutional provision by attacking another organization that's not even in the country, that uses pretext names. I told you this national security is a pretext. That they call you a name is a pretext. That they called you an enemy combatant and they took away judicial, went extrajudicial. That was a pretext for going criminal. They cut a cover over what they do to legitimize it, and I hear crickets on the problem. The Senate Intelligence Committee is pushing Congress to label WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence service. I would deem the Bar Association a non-state intelligence service, the American bar, and the local bar by the state to be a state agency hostile intelligence service. And then they're the soldiers, too. And they're the commanding structure as well. If you think WikiLeaks had it on us, look at the structure you've allowed. They point the finger out there, and they got at least 3 pointing back. They got mutant fingers pointing back. More than 5 on a hand. They got these big mutant 15, 20 fingers pointing back in their grip. And tentacles all pointing back. But they'll point you at WikiLeaks, and you'll agree with it. You'll not like the fact that they're going after a so-called transparency organization, a news outlet, an information outlet. I still think they're a tool. And the players keep coming, and they keep coming together. When these state things happen, they all come together. And so I still see them as a tool, but it's usable for us. It's as usable for them, but it's usable for us to see what they think they want to transform this into. Notwithstanding that, now WikiLeaks becomes the target that did what it did so that the government can tie down your First Amendment rights. How brilliant this plan works. Again, this is one of those models that they have perfected that is not the failed science. This model they use on your social behavior and social engineering is perfected because they know you better than you know yourself. But they're working to take away the so-called First Amendment right if you haven't seen other incursions and intrusions. And they start working this thing to where you have to really watch what you say, and we already start doing that. We're already doing self-censorship. I know I do. I don't mean to help aid someone in getting them to move to the next thing they need to study without not handing them the answer. I'm talking about self-censorship. Well, if you say a certain thing a certain way, if in the minimum, you're just going to cause yourself more grief than if you just avoided it and got on with what you needed to get on to. You don't call attention to yourself when you find yourself in the battlefield. You don't intentionally wave a red flag before the bull unless you know you've got a whole bunch of swords coming in when you do so. In other words, that flag is a strategic action, not just something to go in and do because you want to make yourself known how whistleblower you is. Because as we see this stuff happening again across the pond, and then over in the Middle East, it's happening here, slow motion. We see the Senate now going after you're a non-state hostile intelligence service. You start giving out information. Isn't that what you are? You're using a conduit of social media. That's another that they own essentially, that they control. Isn't that just a media organization that's a non-state hostile intelligence service by this definition? That they are, and you see the YouTube purging going on, and people are now moving around to find different places. And it's all based in the monetary side, but to me, I told you, I don't care. I know it costs money, so donate to the networks, but to me, I kind of divorced this fictional system a long time ago. It doesn't mean I don't need things, but it's not something that there's not a compulsion to move through it. And I try to move despite it, and I try to move at every hardship, and notwithstanding what I don't have, and don't do, and can't do. And maybe even my ignorance in lots of things like this digital currency, for as much as I turn it down, I tell you it's a neat idea. But there's constraints coming that I'm not so sure about, that I don't want to be captured into, that then I am controlled at the point in the future. And we're already kind of looking at that at some point. A lot of times, like for myself, piggybacking, if you will, on Grimner's work, if something happens to Grimner or the network, that voice that connection's gone, folks. And for the way we've got this set up, even though we go out in a lot of places, the broadcast would cease until I could find a corollary, if there would be one available. That's how actually tenuous this whole thing is. That the speech is coming, they're telling us that the Senate's willing to come after your First Amendment right by pointing out somebody that's not here, but that's going to be actually relating to everything that we do. And we see an evidence of how this works already in another country. A Nazi grandma, Holocaust denier Ursula Haberbeck, sentenced to jail. She's an 87-year-old woman who's been sentenced to prison after she claimed the Jews were never exterminated in Auschwitz. Her criminal record includes 2 fines and another sentence for sedition. And so if you don't go ahead of this one and read what sedition is and understand how you have to position yourself, if you in the future, they're talking about something that is more obvious a thing to attack. It's just as fraudulent the government's done there, but nonetheless you see how they do this. If you don't understand what I'm telling you about how to look ahead in the future, that this is coming in different ways, and maybe not this particular thing on this particular subject matter, but in others, and you don't start to think about how to protect yourself on the notice that's given to you here, you will become part of the fodder and be removed as part of the help that people are going to need. And you will be the example to turn it the other way, to have a word in your mouth on how to turn these things around, in part, as I suggest. Because at the point where, see, that it doesn't matter what anybody else says about, oh, it's not real, it's fiction. It doesn't matter. These people will grab you and stick you in a cage. That's going to be your reality, whether it's lawful or not. Now, how can you expect law when they said they went extrajudicial on you already? How can you expect anything but military force and consequence when they're giving you notice that it's all gone there now? Wake up to the reality, folks. You've been slumbering. Open the eyes. I know it's not, I want to sleep myself. I want to stay a little bit, 10 more minutes. No, there's a fire happening, and it's the end of your bed. Get up. Get a clue about this. An 87-year-old woman is going to be sentenced to 5 years in jail. You think that's a death sentence? No, it could very well be, couldn't it? And they don't care. And they don't care the lie that they're putting on here. They don't even recognize, when you get to the bottom of the story, the article itself says, oh, there was 6 million Jews were exterminated across Europe under Adolf Hitler's dictatorship. Oh, they've called now across Europe. And that was a lie. We found out that the people that have the Holocaust Museum agree it wasn't 6 million now with their new plaques. So this article and these people that do this to 87-year-old women are criminals under the pretext of a cause. And it's a false cause. Now, we can continue to agree with we could outcry like I'm doing right now, cry out for it, or we can start preparing and start coming to the aid of people that are being oppressed by these things. And you're going to watch locally. It's already happening. If you haven't been in the courts and through the system, you don't understand how it's happening. And so that's what we also fight that on a daily basis. A government official makes an assertion, it's wrong. We now go right to the felonies. We go right to where the law says, and we make that complaint. We don't make an excuse that it may not be executed on. We make the complaint to make the public record. And as one of the guys that did it wrong against what I said he should have done and told him right, he did it wrong. He did say one of the side benefits of doing the paper filing, it backed the government off of coming in and interfering and harassing him. And I was happy to hear that because I thought that that's what would happen. That's usually what happens. When you have even a decent argument, a decent presentation, maybe not sufficient in law, you can back these people off as well. And so it's not a complete win, but it's the benefit to show they are paying attention, and they only pay attention to those that come back against their oppression. And the way we're learning to do it is identify even in the statutes, even the codes, the elements, the act, the conduct or omissions that make the elements of a particular statutory crime, and we make that case. I don't have to talk about history about that. I don't know, anybody who's had a criminal complaint, even a traffic ticket, knows how simple and how easy it is to make a short sentence to get someone subject to a court of competent jurisdiction, whether or not you challenge its competency. It doesn't take much. What it does take is fulfilling the elements stated in the particular law for the violation. In this case, not a violation, a crime. And I'm suggesting find the felony, because that's the only imperative offense that's mandatory on the government to start to prosecute, so that you can find that they're in collusion as well. So the Senate's now moving on the First Amendment. They're pointing out this WikiLeaks as a central hub of a problem. I don't know how much more I can predict this stuff to you folks. We now have evidence again. It's not the only first one, but they'll sentence an 87-year-old woman to 5 years in prison over saying that that no one died in Auschwitz. And there's as much proof that says that was a work camp. and that the people that died there died from the disease, from not being able to get the nutrition because the Allies bombed all the supply lines that were keeping those people healthy. And yet you don't hear that part of the story. You don't hear that as we found out, just a simple study of the basic history, I think it was, and I don't remember all these people, Eichenwald or whatever his name was, but the right-hand man of Hitler that oversaw these things was a Jew, so-called. He was just a different type of Jew that hated the other type. And I use the word Jew loosely because I don't believe that's a religious believing people. That's not necessarily a race under DNA provable. And I've gone through that over and over. There's no evidence of any being able to prove any of that. It's a belief system. And Hitler's right-hand man in the SS was another Jew with a belief system different than the ones of the Jews that he put in the prisons or the work camps, whatever the heck they were. It doesn't matter at some level. This is what war does. See, we forget the whole point. There was war going on. And so, without getting all lost in that, they're coming showing you that the 87-year-old does have no protection against speaking her mind. And you won't either. And we see this, how did they find out this information about you? Was this surveillance state? Remember, I said that's why you want to be careful. You should have something to hide against these people that will put an 87-year-old woman away for her opinions. She didn't go hurt anybody, but her opinions were enough to make her commit sedition in that country. SpyAgencies.com surveillance illegal court rules. Those of you that have been looking at Kim.com's case, you find out that even though there's a law constraining the government, they don't care. It doesn't care. Those people in it, they're not talking about the government, we're talking about the people in it, don't care. And you get subjected to this power, and the most prevalent example right now is Kim.com's case. That the High Court has ruled a government spy agency's entire surveillance operation against the internet businessman Kim.com and his associates was illegal. And so what was the answer by the legislators, the plunderers in that country? Once it was deemed illegal, they moved to make it legal what they did. If you don't think it's gone completely nuts and you live in a captive, a cage, an open-air prison. They didn't say, oh, we didn't do it right and we'll never do that again. No, they're going to go make the law like the Senate is doing to outlaw your speech and let them be of surveilling you without need to worry about any law. There is a law against it. They need to change the law to make it proper. No, that's all they're claiming that they need right now. So this is an important case. I've been thinking, Kim.com's kind of an interesting fellow there. I really don't understand some of what I have some problems with what I see. I have some problems with some of the things I have heard. But at the point of a government working in concert, in conspiracy, New Zealand working with the United States government, and knowing the corruption of the government, of both governments now, and their surveillance system, to see what they're doing to this gentleman and his family. And I commented to him yesterday after seeing his little documentary. I don't know of anybody who fights this government criminals in earnest that hasn't had their relationship destroyed. And his was. His family's still hanging on, and he had the ability by money. He had the ability to keep most of it together. And he's a pretty unique guy that way. He's living under a good star, I can tell you that. None of whatever he's got going for him, it works for me. But more power to him on that, because whether I understand what he's doing and how it was done and all, when you see that the government didn't move in presumption of the law working to constrain them, and they didn't care, and they're willing to destroy your life, you got to take that as a notice, and in how long it takes and what it takes in order to try and get that exposed is something you got to take to heart, and why I've attempted to try and show you, try not to be into the jeopardy side first. it's almost impossible to expose. And he just happens to be that kind of an individual in the world that's able to, come out smelling like a rose on a lot of things. It's still not over for him. A lot of times it's this game that you play in the court system. They win the first one, you appeal, you can win the second one, they appeal and they win, because the final step is the government talking about its own ability to beat you down. On what? On the pretext that it's saving the rest of you all for your security. And nobody steps up to say, but wait a minute, that's not security, and actually challenge that. And where would you go, actually? I mean, it becomes big convolution. If you don't even know, as the Ranchero 42 found out, that the Nevada court cannot be shown to be competent, and you didn't know that, and you want to start going over there and railing against justice and this and that, and the DA and the FBI and Dirty Dan Love and all this. You keep talking about all that stuff. What's the option other than hoping a jury can stop the nonsense? Because they can't yet. They've been trying. They're working on it. They can't yet stop that jury. That's going to be one of the big linchpins. But see, they don't need a jury in order to get you tied up like they didn't need a jury for Kim.com. They didn't need someone overseeing the fact that they were working, New Zealand was working in collusion with the federal government in its criminality to do something that under law is not actually possible for what I can see the charges were. A court came out subsequently and says, yeah, you can't, these copyright problems that you're claiming, they really aren't the cause. What you would be when you read some of the paperwork, you say, well, but what they're complaining of is a fraud, not copyright infringement. Why didn't they allege just a fraud? Well, if they did just a fraud, they probably didn't have enough evidence, and so they had to fabricate, make a model of this monster that Kim.com was, throw in all kinds of stuff, piled on, in order to make it look like they could do it, and the system, and this is what they do in your cases, they'll throw in all kinds of stuff that's irrelevant and wrong and unlawful, but because they have the power of the signature and the presumption of right because they are the government, they can beat you down, and pretty handily. It's taken Kim.com all this time to start to expose. There's major crimes going on against him. That even if you look at the fraud alone may not have been enough to get him extradited, or certainly not swatted and having all his property stolen. And if you aren't putting this together on how difficult this becomes, you're just hiding in a place and hope that this monster, this tentacled beast doesn't get you one day. That's all you're doing. The problem with that is more people are being harmed. The arsonists that we call the Forest Service, they're now burning people's houses, and everyone looks around, well, this is a crime, but we don't know how to stop it. I do. Why don't they? I just go read the law, folks. Why don't they? They're the ones in the decision. Why did they allow property damage? It's right in the policy why they allow property damage, but that's not good enough on the county level. That policy is not law. That policy doesn't meet the obligations and duties of the county. This action with the surveillance society, where your freedom of speech and association is destroyed, now coming into the Senate near you, is the tools that they do. They don't go and constrain themselves to the Constitution. They figure out laws that they make you have to challenge in order to destroy, then they can destroy you until you can get it thrown off, and you have to go to them to get that decision. What's your odds there, folks? How much time are you going to spend going in that direction? I will agree with some people that, well, how are you using the system against itself? Well, the way I do it is you use the system to show it couldn't go that way. In other words, we find the statute that says a patent, the state shall maintain, no suit shall be maintained which shall set aside, annul or cancel or impact a patent. You use that statute. So the system isn't even part of the equation. It's been foreclosed. And anybody who wants to go contrary to that becomes the criminal on its face. That's your prima facie complaint and probable cause. I don't know why these concepts are so hard to get and understand. It's not using the system. It's showing where those criminals in the government seats that have secreted themselves in are utilizing the office beyond what it was available, and the law also says that's a felony. And if you tell somebody the law says about that has the authority to do something, and for those of you that are keeping track, go to 18 U.S.C. sub 4, and they don't do something, they're a felon. Under 18 U.S.C. 3, as a misprision of felony, accessory. Why don't we just make these statements when, not our opinion, the facts show by the elements required by the statute that it's happened? Why don't we start filing en masse these statements? And by the fact of their lack of response by the government, disprove and the government in its purpose. I'm pausing. Why don't we do that? I just don't. That's the answer in my mind. A part of the answer in my mind is that we have to be integrated with ourselves. We each move non-dependently on the wrong we need to be right at all the same time, making a public record of our just our witness of the crime, essentially. And that the system will not respond, now dumps it back onto the people that are in the offices to do so. They come underneath the same criminal scrutiny. They also come underneath dereliction of their office. Malfeasance and dereliction and delinquency. Why don't I hear more complaints? Notwithstanding the fact that the system's going to protect itself. Why don't I hear the complaints? Why don't I know of many people that know how to put a complaint together? It's a rhetorical question. I'm not looking for an answer. I think I have a knowledge to know why that is. But I don't want to have an answer like it's an excuse. We just have to know that's been imposed upon us and by our own nature, and we're going to have to overcome that. California Supreme Court rules against police collection of license plate data. How long have they been getting these systems in? Who was it that made the first inkling of an idea? Hey, yeah, we need some electronic data gathering equipment because we're going to be able to make lots of revenue having 100% of the time people having computers reading license plates. Who came up with that idea that it wasn't first checked for its lawfulness? That you can see right here of the inversion of what the system ought to have been versus what's happened, or the adulteration because it's in commerce and they have a license to do it, that even under commerce principles, the California Supreme Court rules against police collecting of license plate data. Data, big data, government data. Data is going to kill you. Silent weapons, quiet wars data. The Supreme Court come up and said you can't do that in general. Again, we're back to there's something still working in the constitutions about probable cause. You can't just go as a government looking and surveilling everybody. Oh, maybe Kim.com's issue is that's what the law says. They says you're not supposed to use intelligence services to surveil citizens of New Zealand or even ones permanently in residence. And then you find out that there was a game behind the system. The New Zealand government was in play to make sure that Kim.com was that permanent citizen so they could try to extradite him. How are you supposed to know this up front, folks, with the way they have the system is beyond me. I don't even know how to get at that. How hard are now you looking at a system where they got a bunch of criminals in the system that make you look like a criminal to exalt themselves, to make more criminals out of all of you all that haven't been yet caught? I keep looking up. The title tells me everything. The legislators are willing to put laws and the local governments willing to put in infrastructure, cost lots of money because they see a dime to make, and it's a pretty dime, a pretty big one. They see revenue to happen, and they don't care about you or the law. That it takes years before a Supreme Court case can be developed in order to say, well, no, that was all wrong. And then it's only a narrow scope. Anyway, do I need to say more? I mean, isn't it enough that you hear this is going on and that society is running you down because you're letting it? On its face, I'm not even touching the commercial problem here. And it doesn't apply outside of that. I'm just saying the Supreme Court says within the context of that, just getting license plate readers to just gather information on millions of unwitting drivers, that's another lie. They're not all drivers. It's been unconstitutional all this time that no one says, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Why don't we get a finding from some place that's valid in law first? Let's be respectable to the people. Let's honor their presumption of innocence. Do you hear any of that coming from anyone, folks? Then you live in an occupied territory. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And when you do nothing, why do you complain? I don't know. These questions actually just shut me down. I don't even know what to say. I kind of lose what I even want to say. Why? Until we get the answer to some of these questions, which are really the answer to why it's still continuing, I don't know what more to say. It has nothing to do with definitions. It has nothing to do with all you think you know, or what happened to the Fed. It has nothing to do with the Act of 1789. You don't even know how to use it. It doesn't matter. Well, I know the Act of 1789 has made districts and corporate this, and it's not any of that, but we're going to believe it anyway. We're going to stand there twiddling our thumbs or twirling on our thumbs. What are we going to do? How long do we take this lie upon us and continue that it's okay, that it goes for years, people are harmed, has to go through this archaic system that they've set up in order to help the plunder, that it takes, really, not that the jury is the end-all be-all, but it's in lots of part, the jury is really the only point, and you're just convincing a bunch of people that you're going to tug on their heartstrings, you're going to tug on their fallen nature to come your way. Is the only protection we have from this, how organized this plunder is against us. This came out here. Johnson & Johnson ordered to pay $417 million in a lawsuit linking talcum powder to cancer. I don't know how they did that, folks. But here we've been told talcum powder's fine. Johnson & Johnson's got a $417 million bill now because this stuff causes cancer. And this is not the only case. How they were able to do the causation, I haven't been able to figure out yet. But there are some cases the judges said, no, your cause, that your connection to the causation of talcum powder to cancer, a little too tenuous for this court's jurisdiction. Those are interesting to read for. How did one group of people do it and the other people not? Again, a lot of these people had to have attorneys, so those apparently are doing something correctly. I don't know what the inside scam is that's going on. Johnson & Johnson ordered to pay $417. Okay, that's a corporation making it from you. You go buy their product, but maybe it's not the talcum powder product now. Maybe it's something else. But this is the stuff we go on for years. It doesn't get checked out, and then people get harmed. I just saw Frumpy said, what are we going to do? I say, I don't know what to tell you. I'm talking generally to anybody. What is the wrong you want to be made to make right? And maybe then we can start with that decision. It gives me a direction. First of all, finding the wrong you want to make right gives me a subject matter to look at, and then I can decide for myself to say something, whether or not I have any kind of knowledge in that to offer. Or I might know somebody that has a knowledge that can offer. But we could just say, oh, look around and we have nothing, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We can ask that till we're dead and nothing got happened. Nothing, and if wrong got happened, the wrong that you're looking at, that finally piqued your interest, still gets away from you. And so I don't know. That's a more difficult question. What are we going to do? On what? I ask. On what? And then it's, how earnest are you? Am I just yakking my jaw? Am I just jacking my jaw to just talk? Oh, listen, let's see how creative this guy gets on how to do this, and then do nothing with it. That's not working for me either, that's for sure. And so I have tests that I run for people and to see what they're earnestly going to do. Again, I can't tell you how, it doesn't take much to excite me and thrill me for you all that do this. And Rancho 42 did it last week, and he came up with his answer, and I'm just like, great. There's more to learn, but man, that's pretty cool. He now sees, whether he understands this, and I hope after hearing the broadcast that if he does, he now hears that he can now look at that and see the glaring just crime against the people in Nevada that crickets, no one's talking about. Not even those that are the attorneys that claim to be the protectors of you all. Now, I think Gary L. was talking about this thing last week. I couldn't get to it before. Again, if I don't get to this knowledge before, there's lots of hosts that can pick this stuff up. The point is that I thought this case was interesting because some cases got it and some cases don't. This talc now has somehow been shown to cause ovarian cancer when applied regularly for feminine hygiene. Now, I'm not so dislocated from anatomy, but the causation is kind of interesting to me here. And I don't have the time to go look at it, but the point is that they're giving you products and they go underneath these assumptions that everything's fine and it's not. They harm people, and it takes those people, while they're harmed no less, while they're under the disabilities, to come up and protect themselves. Again, if you haven't seen how absurd this whole system now is, I don't know what to say, and I wouldn't even know where to begin. Certainly not on my own. I've forgot my own way of stopping the absurdities up front. But for this, I haven't had the problem. I try to stay away from a lot of these things. I think that talc I would be using to coat on a piece of rubber to keep it from sticking to something is what I'd probably use that for. And I don't think cancer affects rubber. So, to me, I look at it in a different way. So, you can be linked up as you will. But when we start doing the real tests, then we start seeing real problems. The scientists just found out the whole of astrophysics may not be based on a darn thing, and everything they're looking at isn't reality, and yet they kind of know there's something exotic, completely outside their perception, that they really haven't bored down on, that might actually give them a better way to go. But no, they persist all these years without actually testing and going down their fairy tale. You live in this fairy tale, and people die underneath this fairy tale. Pesticides linked to major birth abnormalities and major new study, sustainable pulse rates. For those of you who want to type that in, high exposure to pesticides as a result of living near farmers' yield fields appears to increase the risk of giving birth to a baby with abnormalities, in quotes, by about 9%, according to new research. Now, you can read this. The point is, I would just say, no duh. No duh. Pesticides are a bunch of chemicals. Better living through chemistry was a lie, apparently, because it's not better living for us. It's better economic living for corporations that can get us to continue to use this. And these farmers are, they just want to produce their food. They're only understanding what the science of the corporation tells them is fair and good and safe, and it's not. And then it's an excuse. Well, here's a study, 9%. Take your chances, folks. Here's a notice to you. But what can I say? I mean, they can legalize pesticide spraying by certain spray over sprays, and that's supposed to be legal. It's not lawful. It's legal. It's a trespass, but you're not going to get it. Why? Because maybe you don't have a law in your locale that gives you remedy. One of my suggestions hasn't been proven out yet. We're still looking for a place to do that. Make an ordinance that gives remedy to people that are actually harmed, not aesthetically harmed, actually harmed. There's got to be an actual thing going on. I say that because the new agenda wants to make aesthetics valuable, and they're just not. How you feel about something, your subjective belief has no value to the objective reality. How a scientist feels about a black hole, and because he can't touch it and taste it and do it, and he gives it up into a model that comes out of his imagination, doesn't mean it's reality. It has no value. Prescription ecstasy. You want to see how nuts this is going? U.S. FDA designates club drug a breakthrough therapy. No, then what's the point about getting everybody in violation for crimes and drug use? I mean, where do you start drawing the line? Well, they're not. They're going to draw the line on letting you have everything you want in a drug, wherever. Remember, they're decriminalizing all this stuff. Make it just criminal enough, remember? Just like the Clean Water Act. We can pollute just enough water. We can pollute just enough air, and we're okay. And if we do it a lot, we just have to tell someone, and we're still not culpable. Because it's not about the clean water, not about not doing drugs, it's about control. Prescription ecstasy. US FDA designates the club drug a breakthrough therapy. Go ahead. Have fun, folks. I don't even know what the heck the stuff is. Chemistry-wise, chemistry has always kind of fascinated me, but other than that, I've never been into this drug stuff. And yet I see the adverse effects of it, and here the government's going to hand you more. And then complain about it. It's just insanity. California initiative would decriminalize psychedelic shrooms. Why? Because they've now found that it actually helps PSD or whatever, PTSD. And here's it says right here, what I want to do, and this is the guy who initiated the ballot, and this is why I wanted to tell you all, you folks have the initiative power in certain states. You bring the initiative, you work hard to get the signatures, you can bring a law before the people, whatever you think you need, and the people can vote on it and not be filtered through the Bar Association or the political party controls. And what this gentleman was saying about this psilocybin condition and his research, and he went and got the facts about how this could help, what I want to do is take the shackles off. I want to have an adult conversation. Well, I don't agree that with him that we're insects, adults. But I do agree that he wants to take the shackles off, because I do agree we're slaves. Whether that be in our inaction, whether that be our assumptions, whether that we're subject to exactions of every kind. It's extortions, folks. If you don't understand this, the government has given its license to extort from you. That's a felony everywhere I know. But this gentleman knows you're in shackles. You should too. What's sad for me to read is a little further on. It says, one of the reasons is not only are soccer moms high now, but some of them are taking shrooms. It is not a very high value for the society, is it? This is where you're watching, they're telling you the truth of how we're sliding down into the stinking abyss if it wasn't a swamp. As I've told you, we're all doing ever so slowly. Here's another aspect of it. All these chemistries are no good for us, and yet they prescribe them for us and they give us cover. They may very well, psilocybin may very well help people. Again, a natural product, not adulterated, not concentrated, too much at least by the preparation, has valid medicinal value. These substitutions, maybe not so much. So you see, like the covering of a pharmaceutical problem with the allowance of the problem that's starting to cost the government an exposure that they don't need anymore, that they have a different plan to put you all under and keep you under the influence of whatever you're going to choose now. They don't want you responsive. That a mom is under the influence of drugs, I don't know what to tell you, how bad that makes me feel, that I know that's the reality, but there's nothing I can do about that. Where did people go that they thought that? There was just no thought in my mind that I could imagine that I would be under the influence of anything while I was looking over little ones at all. And that's been a conscious decision in my life. At all. That we now have admissions that people are walking around just blitzed. Whatever you want, now they're going to give it to you. Because there's a bigger plan afoot, and they don't want you responding properly. They want you to understand how to respond properly, and it's not going to be on your own, but it's going to be that you respond at all. And so what they do, they give you all these prescriptions, all these pesticides, they do a little bit here, a little bit there. The impacts are cumulative. No one actually looks at the law that says it's supposed to be checked. They don't give you a remedy for the trespass. They don't allow that to you, but they can take, and they use this as an example, a provision that allows them to impose more. So while California is going to go ahead and let you use those shrooms, and they're also looking to do other things, like other states decriminalizing all these things that were heretofore felonies that put you in jail, non-victim crimes again. They're not going to hand them to you. And you have a biological process, and all these pharmaceuticals that are substitutes for all these natural these things are going through your biological process, and you have this evacuation process that has to go, and that has to go somewhere and get treated. And when it gets treated, it goes into the water system, which the Clean Water Act says they can pollute a little bit, and we get proof here. Researchers find antidepressants in fish brain tissue. Far from helping every fish be happy-go-lucky down under the sea, it turns out that human antidepressants could be numbing our guild friends to their environment. Well, I don't know about all that numbing, and it could be, yeah. The point is they took a test, and in brains of fish, there is antidepressants. The same pharmaceuticals that they just give to you that it's okay to pollute the water system that they can't filter out. This problem isn't even a new story. What they're showing us is that the tests are, and this was coming from a conservation biologist as well, so she has her own bent on this, but the point is that they did a test and they said, well, we do find these molecules here in the brains of fish. It is going in the water into the fish. And so what does California do right on the heels of all this stuff? They let you have all these prescription drugs now. They let you have all the psychedelic, whatever you want now. Just take it, and you're going to go put it in the water system. And so California is going to use that. See, you're the problem. You're a human animal. You are causing problem to the nature, and we get to tax whatever we want to mitigate your harm. California legislature wants to tax drinking water for the first time in history. Why do they want? Because they want to use those funds, and this is just black hole funding theft, but they're going to tell you it's to help mitigate you urinating in the water system and poisoning them darn fish. Do I need to read the stories, Bobby? Do I need to read this? Just the fact that California is going to go ahead and tax water. See, there's nothing off limits. Everything's now a luxury as well. It's all beyond, it's all prosperity. And you live in austerity, so everything you get, even water, is not a natural resource, not a natural right for humans to drink water, you little animals. No, we're going to tax it because you excrete these chemicals that you need, that you keep coming into us to take. And we license these people that it's okay to pollute you a little bit, and you start polluting the water, and your impact is so much, we're going to tax you. And we're going to hand it to some natural resource services company, some black hole funding sponge parasite, and we're going to get them and pay them, somebody that we probably own the company to, and we're going to pay them your tax money on the water you drink. It's a luxury now to drink water. That's what's going down here, folks. They're explaining it. Please go fishing. Washington State says the farmed Atlantic salmon escaped a broken net during the eclipse. All this genetically modified salmon they said wouldn't get out, did. So now they say, it's just going to die. It's not going to hamper anything. Well, nature has a way, folks, is all I can tell you. That Atlantic salmon that they GMO'd is now in the wild. And the Washington State threw off the covers and said, let's go catch them. They don't have a plan. It all happened during the eclipse, which I found pretty fascinating generally. High tides, folks. Didn't even have a plan. Containment net broke. So we have a GMO'd fish now in the wild. What they said wouldn't ever happen. It'd be too far away. Oh, but don't worry about it. It's not going to breed. They got no guarantee of it. They can't know where the fish are. They're getting you to go do it. Are these the same fish that ate the food that had the prescription drugs and antibiotics in it they want you to eat as well? You can better bet that it is. And all this control, they use black hole funding to get some service company to come in under the private public partnerships and to steal you blind and cause more control and regulation. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope something I said opened your eyes, get you awake, slumbered, and maybe you get out of bed quick and put the foot of your bed off a fire. I don't know how you're going to do that. Grab a cup of water or something, but thank you to Grimner for the website, reallibertymedia.com, and the archives and all the support there, in Jules at ucy.tv. I appreciate the podcast and the recast on Thursday, and extraterrestrial broadcasters, and then the social network, freedomsnetwork.com. I went blank on that at any rate. Tune into that, and remember, you find me on Minds. I just try to do the publications a couple a week, and then give you another place to get us, and on BitChute and some other things. But thank you very much. I'll be here next week. Tech diffs or nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.
The Anti-Media Radio with your host Nick Burnaby here on